Greg. How you going, mate?
Doing very well, Robbie. Thanks for having me on. I appreciate the opportunity to spend a little time with you.
Thank you very much, man. I appreciate the opportunity to wake up early. You've got me out of bed nice and early this morning, but it's good. It's good to get back into practice. Now, firstly, I appreciate you giving up your time. I know how busy you might be, sort of planning and getting back into things and getting things going again. How have things been over there for you at the moment? It's pretty crazy times. We've got coronavirus protests going on over there. Kanye West has just decided he wants to run for president. So it's all happening over there, mate. How have you been?
Yeah, to say the least, it's all happening. Been doing okay. It's been a challenge on a lot of different levels, right? I think any one of those things in its own bubble would be a lot to kind of manage and navigate in a particular year, but to sort of have all of them come together has been a real challenge, and I think it's been real hard for the kids. But my own kids plus the athletes that we coach, just that they're we're all facing stuff that's been unprecedented, but you would have hoped at this point in the US that we would have progressed and kind of done some good work on flattening the curve with COVID-19 and being in a better spot. But our lack of leadership probably hasn't helped in that regard. And so we're not much better off than we were in March, which is frustrating, but we're just trying to take it a day at a time and stay positive and hope that Kanye doesn't get elected.
And another thing is, I know a lot of Australian swimmers that have been over there and some who are heading over next year to get amongst the university systems. What are some of the keys to transitioning into that college environment, do you think?
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, there's of course, there's always going to be, no matter whether you're coming from Australia or a different club team in the state of Texas, there's going to be a physical adaptation, right, and a change, and just understanding how that works. But from a life perspective, I think it's one of the most difficult things. It's like you're really now on your own for the first time, and you're doing it at age 18, and like coming into this team environment and recognizing that not one person, no matter how great they are, is more important than the group as a whole. And so, when you have some of the best athletes in the world joining your team who aren't, up there saying, hey, it's all about me, and they're saying it's all about the team, it just kind of gets everybody on a level playing field. And I think that's super important. I think if you get a little too myopic on your own swimming and your own success, that transition then to the team culture is harder. And so, just kind of recognizing that. But I think coming here, especially if you're coming from overseas, where your whole life is changing, it's a good time to just sort of redefine yourself a little bit, even as a swimmer, and how you view yourself as part of something that's much greater.
Mate, Simone Manuel, what a phenomenal athlete, Olympic champion, world champion, just an out-and-out superstar of our sport. Talk to me about your partnership with Simone, and how have you seen it progress from maybe the time you first started working with her until now?
It's been pretty awesome. I think I've now coached her for 6 years, which is about as long as I've coached anyone in my career, coming up on year number 7. And I love Simone. She's just sensational in every way. And I think it really has been a true partnership. While she trusts me, I also trust her a lot and ask for her feedback on things all the time. And so we're constantly talking, whether it's stroke technique, weekly training schedule, meets, training camps. Of course, I got all that stuff sort of mapped out in my head, but just being able to talk through some of the finer details of that has been super important. And she's a pretty rare breed in that, like, she is she's a sprinter, obviously, as you said, world champ, Olympic champ, but trains on a different level. Like she trains and always has trained more, from a middle distance perspective, and she's not afraid of the work. And so she really has just embraced the process of what it takes to get better. and just has that mindset that is just like killer instinct, especially in racing. And you've seen that, right? She wins a whole lot of races that she's not, quote unquote, supposed to win. And that's because of herself and her confidence in what she's doing, what collectively we've been doing. And that makes it a lot easier to coach her. So that's been a really fun partnership. But to see the growth from the first time I started working with her, I wasn't coaching her yet. She was about a month away from enrolling as a student at Stanford University, was 2014 Pan Pacs. She had already, gotten into Stanford. She had committed to coming, but she wasn't on campus yet. And I was a coaching staff member with Team USA that particular summer. By the way, the worst weather of all time for a Pan Pacs. Everybody in Australia is like, I don't understand it. It never rains this much. It's never this cold.
Yeah.
Oh, it was the worst.
Yeah.
Anyway, I digress.
Had to be an outdoor meet too, didn't it? Had to be in the gut.
It did. And she had, had a meet where she struggled a little bit, and seeing the growth from that to 2015 World Championships, like, okay, we haven't quite figured this out yet, to just sort of personal and athletic growth to the 2016 Olympics, bam, win. 2017 win, 2019 win both events, and swims on a 4x200 free relay. She led off. A lot of people forget that. She led off in 156 flat. It was her best time by over a second. And that was after having done the semifinal of the 100 freestyle earlier in that session. She had about 60 minutes in between. And so, like, just that, she couldn't have handled that in 2014. And so just kind of seeing that growth has been really great. But then, she's also embraced her role in the swim community. Unfortunately, there are not a lot of Black swimmers in the U.S. And certainly, there have been some on the national team over the years, but not many. And so she's been pretty active in trying to educate Black Lives Matter movement here in the States. And it's been really, I don't want to say fun, that's not the right word, but it's been nice just to see her growth and take on that role as well, especially during these times, which have been incredibly challenging.
Absolutely, Mel. I was listening to a few of her interviews just before we started this, actually, and what was very refreshing was to see the way she took on that role. Like, I think one of the guys asked her in one of those interviews, "Oh, do you get sick of talking about being the first or the only Black athlete around at the moment that's successful?" And she sort of said, "You'd think I would, but I really don't," because she sees it as an opportunity to inspire people and to create change. So I think tip the hat to her on that. I think she's an absolute champion in that. You mentioned in one of your interviews that she's probably the most naturally gifted athlete you have in your program. Have you seen her do anything in or out of the pool that just sort of made you shake your head and go, wow?
Well, I see her do stuff in the pool all the time that makes me shake my head. Out of the pool, no, I mean, I just like how she moves in the weight room. She just is very athletic. So any kind of strength movements, lift movements, she's kind of getting back into that routine, because that was the one piece that she hasn't really had access to over the last 3 months. So kind of getting back in. She was laughing the other day because she knocked her head with a bar doing a clean movement last week. Just a little out of practice, but
yeah.
She's incredibly athletic just in how she moves and how she jumps. And I think of all the athletes I've ever worked with, she adapts to stimulus change faster than anyone I've ever seen. It's like you give kind of one thing, whether it's technical or just even out of the water or a piece of race strategy, like she can make a change almost instantaneously. And it doesn't always stay, right? And so you have to kind of reinforce that. But she is able to understand whether it's biomechanics, to be able to like feel it, change it, and that's really hard to do, especially for someone as good as she is. And she's not closed-minded about that. She's very open-minded about like making changes that if it's going to help her. And so that's a thing, like whether we're doing a drill for her starts to get off the blocks with a little bit more power, depending on, the kind of line that we want to hit when she gets to the water, she can just make a change immediately. And that's so hard to do, especially for athletes that are, her age and as successful as she is. Like, she's not afraid to make changes.
Mate, off the blocks. I like the little plug there that you put in
Yeah,
that.
do you like
Thank you
that?
very much. Yeah, I appreciate it. I'll use that as a little grab for all my promos now. I can't have a discussion with you without bringing up, in my opinion, the greatest female swimmer of all time in Katie Ledecky. 15-time world champion, 5-time Olympic champion, and she's superhuman in some of the things that she's done and achieved in our sport. Give us a little insight into what it's like to work with Katie, and do you sometimes learn as much from her as she does from you?
Yeah, absolutely. And your description is spot on. I mean, she is just the most incredible swimmer that I've ever had the opportunity to work with, or really even watch. She has the ability to kind of go to that place that most other people, even the very best of the best, like, can't go there. And she's really kind of redefined distance swimming, especially here in the U.S. and a lot of ways has made distance swimming cool, which I know it's always been cool in Australia, but we've kind of lagged behind since the Janet Evans era, and it's been fun to see that and how she inspires so many young girls here in the U.S. to, like, get into swimming and to work hard and to embrace it and to be really good in the distance events. And I don't think we're going to necessarily see the impact of that like now, but I do think there will be a wave effect of that down the road. And she's incredible. And I do learn a lot from her, from watching, from having conversation, although Katie is generally pretty quiet. But having discussion on what she's thinking about and what she feels and what she's wants to do, I get inspired. I get inspired every day, and she just does some pretty incredible stuff. And you've seen it. Everyone has seen it at competitions, and we're spoiled that we get to see it in a daily training environment.
How excited are you for the challenge of, obviously we look at last year in the 400, and I know Katie wasn't at her best physically. She was not well, but Ariane, an Australian swimmer, stepped up and really, I guess made some big strides forward in terms of bridging the gap. And if Katie was at her best, maybe she might have been slightly ahead of that, but still the gap has been bridged. A year from now, Ariane's obviously going to have high, goals and in terms of improving herself. So no doubt it's going to be a race to watch, and I'm excited to watch it. So does that excite you to know that, that's going to become fiercely competitive?
Oh, absolutely. And I think, you can't take anything away from what Ariane did last summer. I mean, that was an incredible swim. And just had a great meet in general. Like, I thought her 800 even was a pretty good swim for someone that doesn't, go up to that event very often. And Dean's done a really nice job with her in her progression in her career. And she's absolutely going to be better next summer. And so I get excited about, the challenge that presents. Because, Katie knows that she's not going away, that Ariane's not going away. She's going to be there. And I'm sure it's going to be highly anticipated. But there's a lot that's got to happen between now and then. And, for us, just, I'm sure I don't want to assume, but knowing Dean and Ariane, I'm sure they have a plan on things that they want to attack this year. We're doing that as well, and finding some little things that we're going to get better at between here and next summer. But then, you have to get through the U.S. trials. You can't take that for granted. Even someone like Katie, we have to make sure that we're qualifying in all our events and then, having our turnaround and being better at the game. So there's a lot of kind of steps along the way before they have the opportunity to race each other again.
I could be very cheeky and ask what some of those plans are moving forward, just for my Aussie coaching friends out here, but I'll stay away from that. I won't put you in that position, mate.
I appreciate that.
Mate, we've mentioned, a few of those superstars that you've worked with and also varied. And we've sort of touched on, what does make them, so unique. But, give us a little insight into that mindset, or is it application to training? Is it the way they compete? What sets say Simone and Katie, and obviously, you've got people like Caleb Dressel and Adam Peaty. What sets these guys apart from everyone else, do you think?
Yeah, it's a great question. And, having never coached Adam or having never coached Caleb, certainly I've seen Caleb a lot, but
Yeah.
having never coached him, it's hard to know. But I think with those two men in particular, there's a heck of a lot of athleticism in their bodies. I mean, the watching how they move, the power that they output in their swims and their starts, just watching Caleb jump behind the blocks is insane. I just never seen anybody do that.
Yeah.
And so they're also getting coached up really well. I mean, Mel Marshall, come on, she's done just an incredible job, and Coach Troy with Caleb. And so, it's a combination of things. But I do think at the end of the day, the 6 inches between the ears is ultimately going to separate a lot of folks. And it isn't just in those moments, but it's really in the day-to-day grind. If you can continue to put yourself out on a limb from a training perspective and make those strides and not shy away from competition and really embracing those things, then when you get to those big moments, it doesn't seem so daunting. And I just think that's such a critical piece of it, but it isn't, you can't have, just two of the three. It's like, you have to have the athleticism, you've got to have a good training program, and you got to have the mindset. And I think without, kind of one of those three, it gets tougher. And so, thinking about those athletes and those I've seen over the years, you certainly, haven't seen some of the best in the world that don't have that like instinct to just go. And I think about Maya Dorado, even in that regard, she's very humble, she's not very gregarious in terms of her personality, and she never talks about how good she is, but like, you do not want to go head to head with her. She'll beat you up. And so, she just has that, like, she's got that switch, and ultimately that's what led to her success in 2016, specifically in the 200 backstroke. Everything that we had done, kind of in that year lead up, was for the third 50 of that 200. And that was when she came off that 100 wall and pressed Katinka, because nobody had pressed her yet the entire meet, not to that level.
Yeah.
And just like, I'm not going to back down just because it's Katinka Hosu, who's world record holder, one of the best swimmers in the world. But like, she had that ability to push back and not be afraid of that. And so, how many great swimmers do you see that don't have a strong mental fortitude like that? It's, I don't know of any. So,
absolutely,
that piece is pretty important, right?
About for your own program and your own athletes, what are some of the keys over the next 12 months to make sure they're ready to rumble come trials time, and then obviously moving into the Olympics? I know you're not going to want to give too much away, but what are some of the keys, I think, for yourself that you're looking forward to over the next 12 months?
Yeah, I think identifying the areas where we didn't necessarily do as good a job as we should have this past year. And it's like, hey, we get a second chance on some of these things. Generally, I felt like we were doing great, but there are a couple of areas that we want to get better at. And so recognizing that, again, as I talked about earlier, just the runway to the fall, like, all right, let's take advantage of this so that, ideally September of 2020, we're in a better footing than where we were in September of 2019. And that's saying something given, the COVID experience here.
Yeah.
And then the rest of it, honestly, we've got a plan, but it's going to be somewhat dictated by how things go. Just like the games. And there's no guarantee that the games will happen next summer.
Yeah.
I certainly have a real difficult time foreseeing a scenario where we've got folks in the seats and spectators, certainly not in full capacity. And so what does that look and feel like? And just starting to kind of think about that. And again, just controlling what we can.
As coaches, we always talk to our athletes about pressure, and as a coach, how do you find it? I mean, I've got to be honest. I look at the job you've done, and you'll continue to do, no doubt, over the next 12 months with your program, and you have some of the biggest names not just in your program, not just in a Team America, but in world swimming, and for a lot of that, there's a lot of public expectations, I guess,
Oh,
that come
really?
onto it. Yeah. For me, I look at that and I just think, oh, how does this guy, this is just more a selfish question, how do
Yeah.
you handle it personally? And is it something you just try not to think about? And, you treat them no differently in terms of, yes, it's Katie Ledecky, but this is an athlete that we want to improve?
Yeah, that's a really good question, and I think somewhat misunderstood at times from people that aren't coaching or have never, kind of been in this arena before. That coaching athletes that are that great, it's not always an easy path because there are heightened expectations and there is heightened pressure, and we all as coaches we feel that, and I don't shy away from recognizing it, I guess. I like, okay, this is what it is. I think it helps keep me honest, helps keep me motivated. But of course, that's the reality. But at the end of the day, we're still trying to swim fast, and keeping our focus there is going to be important, because you know what, you literally cannot control anybody else in that final heat with you. If you're in the Olympic Games and you're swimming in the final heat, you don't know what can happen. And so control what you can control.
Now, mate, I like to finish all my chats with some less serious questions,
Okay.
and it sort of gives us, I guess, a little bit of an insight into what you're like away from the pool. So, rapid fire, sort of quick responses, whatever first comes to your head. This is
Okay.
just based around, your favorite movies, your favorite songs, stuff like that. So, what are some of your favorite music to listen to?
Like 50s and 60s, so 1950s, 1960s. I'm sort of an old soul, although I do love all music, and I actually try and teach our team about different genres of music that they have no idea. But I sort of love the Frank Sinatra and Dean Martin era, as well as you get into the early stages of Motown.
Very nice. Now, what about your favorite movies? What have you been sitting down? Have you gone back over any since you've had a bit of time to be at home?
Yeah, a little bit. We actually have introduced our kids to some of the movies that we love. So we went through the Godfather series. Godfather 3 was no good, but the first two were great.
Yeah.
Just trying to get them to watch different comedies from the 1980s, just, different stuff that's kind of fun and silly. But my wife and I started, actually, ironically, yesterday we started watching The West Wing, which was a show here in the U.S., very famous show about a president, and just contrasting that with what's actually going on is a tough pill to swallow at times, but it also gives me hope for a better future.
What about books, mate? Are you a reader? Do you have any books that you might recommend?
I'm a terrible reader. I know this is where Coach Bowman is so good, and it is not my specialty. I don't enjoy reading very much, unless it's kind of a mystery novel of some sorts. But yeah, I don't enjoy reading, especially the self-help books.
What about in terms of books? Has anyone approached you to maybe write one or put one out yourself?
Not yet, but it may be something down the road that I would, give some interest to.
Now, I know you're a man who loves his kitchen and cooking. What are some of your favorite meals?
My homemade Italian meatballs, I think can go up against just about anybody's. My mom's side of the family is Italian, and kind of passed down recipe through the generations, and made some tweaks and changes to my own. And that's what I love to make. I mean, I love anything. I'm simple as cooking steaks on a grill, but my wife makes homemade pasta. And so when you get the homemade pasta with the homemade meatballs and sausage and pepperoni, it's delightful.
Mate, you're getting me ready for breakfast over here now. It's breakfast time, but you're making me hungry. And I'm a man who loves Italy. I've been there a few times now, and I love the food over there. I always come back about 10 kilos heavier because I'm just constantly eating.
That's the challenge.
Yeah, we have gelato for dessert, but on the way home, there's another gelato place. I'm like, well, I haven't had that, and I'd like to have some of that too. in keeping the theme of that, what about countries? I know you probably don't get to get out and explore as much in terms of when you go to these countries, but do you have any favorite countries that you visited?
Yeah, that's the fascinating thing about swim coaches. Like, I have been to some really cool places in the world and haven't seen anything. So I did enjoy my time in Switzerland. I spent a little bit of time in the southern part of Switzerland. I thought Budapest was just incredible when I was there in 2017 for the World Championships. In part because they built this beautiful arena, and then they had the water taxi that like took us back to the hotel, and we'd get up and walk maybe I don't know 500 meters to the hotel from the
Yeah.
water taxi station. So that was a really neat experience. But I would love to kind of get back. The only time I've ever been in Australia was in 2014. Again, miserable weather conditions for Pan Pacs, and didn't really have time to get out and about. And that's something that I would like to do.
Now, mate, if you do come back to Australia and we catch up and we're at the pub, what would I be shouting you for a drink? What would I get you from the bar if I was going up to get you a drink?
Well, it depends. Yeah, it depends. If it was at a pub, yeah, it depends. So I have become a bourbon fan. So I've been drinking a little bit more bourbon. So I would do 2 cubes and 3 fingers of bourbon. I tend to like Basil Hayden's. But in a pub setting, I'm gonna drink beer a little bit more. But my go-to is red wine. Living here in Northern California, we've got some of, and you do as well. But we've got some of the best red wines in the world in this region, and it's easily accessible. And so our go-to at night when my wife and I are having dinner is usually a nice bottle of red wine.
Very nice. Now, mate, I think we'll wrap it up there, and it's a great opportunity just to say thank you very much for coming on. It's an absolute honor to have a chat with you and go through your amazing career so far. Mate, stay safe over there with everything that's going on, and hopefully the coronavirus starts to get control of and calm down. But good luck with your continued success with your athletes and your program, and with everything going on over there. I hope we can stay in touch and maybe get you back on for another chat maybe next year. But until then, thank you very much for coming on Off the Block Swimming Podcast.
Thanks, Rami. I really appreciate it. It was fun.
Where's my button? There. Today's episode of Off the Block Swimming Podcast is proudly brought to you by Pro Swim Workouts.